We are now heading into the third quarter of the fantasy football season, and there are still some big waiver wire moves that we can make, which we're going to discuss today, but you need to start making business decisions. You've got to be assessing which guys that you need to drop in order to take shots on these upside guys with higher projections than they do in future weeks. So we're going through exactly that today, but make sure to go down there, drop a like on this video, and subscribe to the channel to show your support as I continue to get us prepared for the fantasy playoffs. So we're going to go through our guys that we need to check availability on, and it starts out with Raheem Mostert. Listen, Raheem Mostert is 60.4% rostered. Again, maybe not on your waiver wire right now, but I'll tell you this. In one of my redraft leagues, I actually was able to pick him up in advance for this game. So he was on waiver wires in certain leagues of mine, and I picked him up wherever it made sense to. Because here's the thing. Just going through his stat line, obviously, on Sunday, he didn't do much. Outside of 2 touchdown runs, like you take those 2 out, he was pretty bad outside of that. But here's the thing that you could kind of count on here. What we saw from that game versus the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday was that it looks to me like Raheem Mostert maybe filling a little bit of a David Montgomery role for this offense, especially at the goal line here. You've obviously got Devon Achane, who's much better in space, much better in the passing game, and obviously so much more explosive than Raheem Mostert at this point. But at the same time, you've got this guy that they actually are using at the goal line here. And this, to me, is not a fugazi. Like, obviously 2 touchdowns per game, you can't count on that in every week. But one thing you can count on is better efficiency in future weeks from Mostert in all likelihood. And number 2, this team, it was proven, if you had any doubt, which I'm sure people didn't, everything changes with Tua. If Tua is in the game, this team is so much better. So to me, Raheem Mostert is a prime pickup if he's out there. And then the 2 Buffalo Bills wide receivers here, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, these guys are still out there in some leagues. Now, here's the thing with Keon Coleman. 57.8% rostered. Got picked up a bunch last week. Keon Coleman, I've said this since Amari Cooper joined. He is starting to now feel less pressure to be the wide receiver 1, and he's actually becoming their wide receiver 1 at the same time, right? And I think it also is because defenses are shifting more coverage over to Amari Cooper, who I believe is going to have better games in the future. But Keon Coleman, in reality, is like, these defensive coordinators are going to have to learn at some point here in the next several weeks. They can't just leave this guy like without, any kind of safety help over the top. This guy's a legit downfield threat, and he's also a red zone threat as well. So with Keon Coleman here, I just see a ton of upside moving forward with this guy, specifically heading into the fantasy football playoff era. And then Khalil Shakir. I said this when Amari Cooper got traded over to Buffalo. I said, I'm not going to drop Khalil Shakir. This guy I think his value is going to hold pat. And through 2 weeks with Amari Cooper, he's done really well in fantasy. Well, the reason is because this guy actually has, again, less pressure on him to be the wide receiver 1 of this offense. Neither him or Keon Coleman were wide receiver 1s. They both fill specific roles, while Amari is the true wide receiver 1 that defensive coordinators are planning for. But when you're getting with a guy like Khalil Shakir, you're getting a Wan'Dale Robinson type. Except I actually value this guy more than I value Wan'Dale because he's obviously got the better quarterback, number 1. And I think he's just as good of a player, to be honest. This guy after the catch is really good. So I really like Khalil Shakir as well. If either of these guys are on waivers, I prioritize Keon Coleman because he's the bigger play threat. And I think he has more room to grow as the season continues to go on. But if you can't get Keon Coleman and Khalil Shakir is there, you got to pick him up. Now here's where we start making business decisions. Obviously, we could talk about these guys all we want. Who are we dropping them for realistically at this point in the season? Here's my list of guys that we could drop for. Zach Moss, Austin Eckler, Alexander Madison, Juju. With Zach Moss, several weeks straight now. Ever since he was injured, it's been very clear that he's the number 2 option in this backfield. It's Chase Brown's backfield, and even Chase Brown doesn't have a ton of upside, so that leaves Zach Moss with very little upside. He's been unplayable for the past month of fantasy football, and so this guy really, in reality, is just not offering any kind of upside because they can't run the ball very well in particular. And number 2, if you're the number 2 on a team that can't run the ball very well, you're not going to have much upside. Austin Eckler. Listen, I get it. Business decision here. Because look at what his upside has realistically been in fantasy football. Like, he's actually been really efficient on a per touch basis. That's not the problem here. The problem here is that he's not getting enough volume and he's just not getting in the end zone enough. So realistically, when I'm looking at Mostert, Keon Coleman, Khalil Shakir, these are guys that can get you 15, 25-point weeks. And the reality is, like, Eckler is not getting you more than 12 to 15 fantasy points per week. That's just not what he's going to do. So for these types of guys, yes, I would do that. Alexander Mattison, absolutely, that's an easy decision for me personally. His upside, again, he's been impressive, all things considered, being on the Raiders, and the fact that he was never very good originally. He's been impressive, but with these kind of guys that gives you this upside, you're not seeing that with Alexander Mattison, as you can see on his game log here. And then with Juju here, again, business decision, because I actually think Juju has upside. I think he does. The way D-Hop played on Sunday doesn't indicate that he's going to be this Rashee Rice prototype. Juju Smith-Schuster can still play a little bit. So again, what it comes down to here is when I'm looking at specifically these two Buffalo Bills wide receivers here, these guys are young. They're both in the prime of their career. Keon is entering the prime of his career, but it is prime physically in his career. Juju is not in that. Juju can't do that, and there's a lot more options to spread the ball around to now with DeAndre Hopkins there. So I would just rather take the shot on those Buffalo guys than I would with a Juju Smith-Schuster type. Now, going down to our wide receivers that we need to claim right away. Cedric Tillman, Parker Washington, Kayshon Boutte, and Ricky Pearsall. Cedric Tillman, I said this last week. Watch this guy, wait 1 week, see what he does with Jameis Winston. And he was the best wide receiver by far. 2 touchdowns, almost 100 yards receiving. And Jameis Winston is going to provide pretty consistent upside that Deshaun Watson couldn't do. Like, it was just impossible to see upside as a wide receiver with Deshaun Watson. Jameis changes everything. They just beat the Ravens, man. This team has legitimate upside now. So with Cedric Tillman here, he's my number 1 pickup on the week at the wide receiver position, because this guy really does have red zone upside, and he does have big play upside. That was always in his college prospect profile. I always thought that's all he was. He's actually developing into a little bit more. Parker Washington, for one main reason. Christian Kirk is out for the season. He got a broken collarbone on Sunday versus the Packers. He's done for. Parker Washington was the guy who filled in as more of that target guy for Trevor Lawrence whenever Christian Kirk went down. So Parker Washington, I think he does have merit as a target play, similar to a Wan'Dale Robinson type, with less upside here in future weeks. But Parker Washington, if you're struggling at the flex position, if you're in a 2-flex league or just a deeper league, Parker Washington you could do a little bit worse than. Kayshon Boutte, I'll say this. I've mentioned him a couple times over the last several videos. Kayshon Boutte is an interesting one to me. This guy is not going to have tons of upside without Drake May. I think it's a Drake May 100% related thing. Now, Drake May went down in that game on Sunday, but it was just a concussion. Drake May will be back. If not next week, the following week. Kayshon Boutte has slowly become their best big play threat, and he's actually been getting a little bit more involved over the middle of the field as well. Getting a little bit more targets for the Patriots here. So Kayshon Boutte is 0.3% roster. This guy is available everywhere. Like, nobody's got Kayshon Boutte. And honestly, just with the lack of wide receiver talent that's already there, this guy is definitely a pickup that I'm interested in personally, because he can hit the big play upside, specifically when he has Drake May back. And then obviously Ricky Pearsall. Guys, Ricky Pearsall on Sunday night had over 100 yards from scrimmage. Big run towards the end of the game. Definitely increases fantasy upside here. But Ricky Pearsall, bottom line, they just need this guy. So even if he's the wide receiver 3 or the wide receiver 2 in a lot of weeks, they're going to need to use this guy because they're just dropping like flies. Jordan Mason just went down on Sunday night. This team is dropping like flies. So Ricky Pearsall, 22.4% rostered only still. This is another week to go pick up Ricky Pearsall. And then these are the guys that we can drop them for. Colby Parkinson, Christian Kirk, Darius Slayton, and Tutu Atwell here. Colby Parkinson, his time is up. Like, Colby Parkinson had an opportunity at the tight end position without Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua, and he never did squat. This guy's not good. He was always a blocking tight end, and he just never was able to break out. It's over for him. You can pick up one of these guys. Christian Kirk, like I said, he's done for the year. You don't have to worry about this one anymore. Don't put him on your IR. He's not coming back. Darius Slayton, at this point, shouldn't be rostered, in my opinion. Not that he can't provide upside in future weeks, but just, again, with a Cedric Tillman on the wire or Ricky Pearsall on the wire, who are important today, more so than Darius Slayton is, Darius Slayton served out an important role here for the middle of the season for us. It's over now. Darius Slayton goes to your waiver wire while you get one of these guys. Same thing with Tutu Atwell. Served a purpose here for the last, month basically of fantasy football without Cooper and Puka. But his time's up. His time is up. And it's time to take a shot at one of these guys whose arrow is pointing up rather than down. A lot of player I've been talking a lot of smack about lately is Russell Wilson as well. But the reality is, when you get a projection like he has on Underdog this week, you've got to hit the higher on this one. This is your chance to get free money here with Russell Wilson's projection on Underdog at 0.5 total yards. He's going to hit the higher. You need to hit the higher on it. And go down there, get the link that's in the comments below. Use code FFN to sign up for Underdog. They'll match your first deposit 50% up to $1,000 of bonus cash. And you'll be able to win free money from hitting this sweat-free projection on the higher of Russell Wilson hitting 0.5 total yards tonight. And then our running back here, you've got to claim Isaac Guerrero of the San Francisco 49ers. Jordan Mason went down with an injury, same shoulder injury by all accounts that he dealt with a couple weeks ago on Thursday Night Football. This has not gone away. It's still an issue with Jordan Mason. He was trying to play through it. He couldn't play through it through the second half. We didn't see him in the second half. Isaac Guerrero is just, in reality, a part of a team that just needs to run the ball. They literally can't help. Kyle Shanahan can't help himself. That's why his running backs drop like flies. He runs them to oblivion because he can't help himself. He's 3.6% rostered, and again, he's a part of a team that wants to run the ball first. And he's actually been pretty good. He can break off big runs because of their system. And he's a really good athlete. This guy had one of the fastest 40 times at the running back position in this year's combine. So Isaac Guerrero is no slouch of an athlete. This guy can run the ball for them. So if Jordan Mason misses any time, Isaac Guerrero needs to be rostered, and even if he doesn't miss time, we probably won't know how much time he's going to miss in the next couple days here, so Isaac Guerrero just needs to be a waiver pickup automatically, and the guys that I would drop him for, Trey Sermon, Antonio Gibson. Trey Sermon, his time is up. It's over. Jonathan Taylor's back. He's not getting any playing time with Jonathan Taylor. It's over. He served a purpose. We appreciate it, but it's over for Trey Sermon. And then Antonio Gibson, it just doesn't provide enough upside in New England to realistically hold on to this guy when I've got a guy who could be the starter, or at the very least gets you 8 opportunities per game in a better offense, and the guy is just a better player than Antonio Gibson is at this point of his career. Like I said earlier, these are not guys that you're getting on the waiver wire within the first month of the season. They don't have that long sustained, super high upside like a lot of those waiver wire guys do, but there definitely are players that you can get before your fantasy football playoffs that will help you win a championship, and that video is coming out on Monday later in the day, so make sure to stay tuned for that video as well.